Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Master Your Moment podcast. I'm Leslie, guiding you into physical, mental, and emotional wellness. And today with me, I have Tammy Anne Caldwell, and I'm so excited to meet Tammy. Hi, Tammy. Welcome to
Hello
the
from
podcast.
Australia.
Yes, from Australia. And she is part of Above and Beyond Education. And so, can you tell us a little bit about your background and about your business?
Absolutely. So I'm a teacher in Australia and I have been a teacher for more than 12 years, but along the way, I was made aware of a field called mind-brain education or educational neuroscience. And as someone who from a very young age has had a really strong interest in the mind and the brain and the power of our thoughts and our potential as human beings and so forth. And then when I realized I loved teaching and to then realize I could bring those two fields together, it just fit like a glove. And I was like, this is perfect. Oh my goodness. So as a very young teacher, early on in my career, I delved into this field of mind-brain education, which was basically linking what we know about the human brain and the human mind to help us be the best teachers we can be and help the students learn and be their best selves, basically. And as I always say, the brain is central to the learning process, right? You can't learn without the brain. So if we're in the business of learning, which we are as teachers, then doesn't it make sense that we know how the brain learns best? And when you put it like that, it's kind of what I like to say is a no-brainer. It's kind of
Yeah.
obvious. And so yeah, I delved into it, and then after I'd been teaching it for a little while, so basically as I learned, I taught the students in my class. So I had little primary students in a mixed grade country class, and I was teaching them. So I would come to school so excited, guys, I just learned this thing, this is part of your brain called the amygdala, and here's what it does. And I would
Yeah.
explain it to them. So I was being empowered as a teacher, and I was finding that I enjoyed my job even more than I did to start with. The stress just fell away because it was no longer a mystery why some tasks and activities worked and some didn't. I knew exactly what I could do to engage those students, to help them remember stuff. And if they were getting distracted or didn't feel so good, I knew exact things that they could do very quickly to change that around. But they were being empowered as well so that they could take control and care of their own learning, which was amazing to witness, especially in a small primary class. So I was having such amazing benefits of with this approach that I then started sharing it in my own school's teacher professional development workshops and at assemblies and doing speeches to the parent community. And then from there, I did a couple of free presentations at like positive education conferences in Perth. And then the school flew me to Tasmania to present down there. And I thought, I'm
Oh,
really onto something here. Like this is making such a big difference. And it's really like clicking with a lot of the students. And then I started my own business and then took a big leap, a big risk, which I'm so happy I did. And I left my full-time teaching career and yeah, delved right into doing the business. So I was in Perth and I was presenting sometimes for free and sometimes paid at workshops and expos and conferences and in libraries. And a lot of the time to start with, it was just parents bringing their teenagers or their kids to my lounge room and I had it set up there and it was going really, really well. And I got a job teaching a 5-week full-time sort of contract as a relief teacher. I think you guys call it a substitute teacher
oh,
at
okay. Yeah.
at a big Perth public high school. And it was very different to the small primary country classroom that I was used to. But I put everything that I knew into practice in that classroom. And the students went from being apathetic, disinterested in learning, didn't want to be there, like just stand up and swear in class and walk out, stuff I wasn't used to 4.5 weeks later, classroom full of balloons, messages, don't leave, you're the best teacher ever. I got heaps of good feedback for them. And that's a big thing I'm passionate about, is that we as teachers ask the students for feedback on what's working and what's not for them, because they're the reason we have a job and they're the reason we became teachers, and they
Exactly.
do. Yeah, and they can often eloquently explain to you exactly what it is that they're having troubles
Mhm.
with if you ask, and then listen. So yeah, fast forward, I sort of, taught at lots of different schools and put it all into practice again and again. And then I met my partner, Todd, and he was really on board and interested in what I was doing. So he joined my business. And then for the last 5-ish years, we've been presenting our workshops at schools, countless schools all across Australia and New Zealand and Singapore and online. So yeah, we get government funding from the West Australian government, which is amazing, to take it to regional and
Wow.
rural schools and
Yeah.
communities. Yeah, and it's just been going really, really well. So that's it in a nutshell. That's the that's the journey.
Yeah. Well, I'm really curious where you started your learning from. So, how did you stumble upon the brain-based ideas, and where were you learning that information as you decided to start to implement it?
Yeah, awesome question. So basically, I knew nothing about the field of mind brain education to begin with, but then I think it was at the end of my first year of teaching, or maybe slightly into my second, and I worked at a multi-campus school. So across Western Australia, there were 5 campuses spread out with the one principal. And he sent an email out to all the teachers in the state and said, I'm going to this mind brain conference in Melbourne and I'm going to take one teacher with me. If you're interested, email me back. And I sort of emailed back saying, it has to be me. This is my thing. Like, my thing is the mind and the brain. And as he told me afterwards, he goes, you left me no choice, Tammy. Like, it had to be you. So I went across with him. And well, actually, before I went, I researched like for months all about mind brain education. So I literally just started with Googling what is mind brain education. I was listening to videos, reading articles, and there was a lot out there, but they were all written mostly from like neuroscientists' points of view rather than
Right.
like teaching in the classroom point of view. And I've always had this sort of knack of taking really complicated, complex information and being able to regurgitate it and summarize it and package it in a way that is engaging and memorable and practical and comprehensible by even young kids. And so that's what I did. And yeah, I read books. I spoke to people at conferences. I would literally go up to them. I'd email people afterwards and say, I heard you speak at this conference. This is my understanding about how memories are formed. Is this correct? And they'd write back, or they'd talk to me in person. So it's literally like at schools, we say we want to teach kids how to learn. We want to help them
Yeah,
learn
like
how to
that's the
learn.
whole purpose of education,
That's
isn't
it.
it?
Exactly, exactly. And I was putting that into practice because I wanted to learn about this subject I knew nothing about because it interested me so much. So I just went out there and I talked to people. I watched things, I read books, I researched, I Googled, and I just kept following all the journeys and trails and then checking my understanding. And if I realized I'd got it wrong, I'd change it. And since then I've done some courses online as well. And now like you can study it at universities and complete whole degrees in it and things. But yeah, it's
Oh yeah,
just it's good. It's just proof that if you're passionate about something, like there's a good saying, if you are not interested in learning, no one can make you. But if you do want to learn something, no one can stop you. So that's basically what happened.
exactly. I think part of it is our brains are meant to learn. Like they have
Yeah.
this drive to learn. They want to know more. I mean,
Yeah.
as I've been creating these YouTube videos and things like that, like part of the copywriting and how you're supposed to phrase things is in a way that reaches the audience curiosity so they can stay
Mhm.
engaged with you and learn from you because that's the whole purpose.
Exactly. And curiosity is one of the best emotions that we can invoke in students because, like you just said, we get curious and then all of a sudden, boom, like literally our brain's releasing dopamine and we're motivated, we're hooked, we want to know more, we want to know why. So, yeah, that's the best thing we can do in our lessons, just create that curiosity. And there's so much to be curious about. Like, have you seen Planet Earth? You know, like it's amazing. There's so
Yes,
much here.
exactly. I know. I love a curious mind, and I love watching kids when they are learning and when they're like, "Oh, that's why this is connected to that," and that kind of thing.
Yes. Yeah.
That is
I've always said, Leslie, that what you just did then, that
yeah,
I say to my students, like that's the best like sound that you can make. I just love it because it's like it's the penny drops, it's the click, it's the okay, I get it now. It's the best thing kids can do, I reckon.
it is. So, can you explain a little bit more about what does brain-based entail?
Yes, absolutely. Great question again.
What is a mind-body connection? What do you mean by
Yes.
that?
Awesome. Okay. So mind brain education actually combines the 3 fields that are actually in the name of it. So mind, which means it's all about the psychology, which is very simply your thoughts. So your thoughts, your mental self, your mind, and that's combined with the brain science. So the actual physical brain science of what's going on in our brain when we're learning. So that's the different regions, the different processes, the different chemicals that happen. And then education. So teaching and learning in a classroom or at home or in a group or setting or wherever you are, and it combines those 3 fields. And basically, it's taking what neuroscientists know, and this is the really exciting part, I think, is that it's so cutting edge. It's not only at the forefront of the future in education as a global approach, which is recommended by the OECD, etc., and world-leading neuroscientists, psychologists, and educators, but it's taking information about the mind and the brain that is at that cutting edge of what we as humans know, because we don't fully understand the mind and the brain yet, and enabling the future of humanity, young people, to benefit from that knowledge. So it's so exciting. And that same cutting edge knowledge about the mind and the brain and how to be our best self from a sort of physically healthy point of view, a mentally healthy point of view, happy and well-being, but also academically, cognitively, intellectually be our best. It's all of
Yes.
those things together. And there's the same information that military special ops soldiers use, and like really high-performing, successful entrepreneurs and business people, and very elite, high-performing athletes and sports players, and of course, very high-performing brain scientists. They're using this information and they're putting so much time and effort and energy into understanding this and then working out how to put it into practice so they can be their best selves and so they can reach their true potential. And as I said in my TEDx talk, I am so passionate about how young people, the future of the planet, deserve to know and use this information too, so that they can be their best self and perform or reach their true potential as a whole person. I'm not just talking about just academically.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah,
I know, because we want to be moving up as a society instead of moving down.
exactly. We want to be evolving the human race, and we can. That's exactly it. Yeah. And yeah, it is such an exciting field to be a part of. And then what I've done, and again, this approach is recommended by the OECD as well as sort of lots of other leading educational organizations and neuroscientists, etc. Plus, it just makes common sense, and that's how it should be. If it makes common sense, and you go, oh yeah, of course, you're on the right track.
Right. Exactly.
It's combining that brain-based mind-brain approach with a holistic approach, and the two do need to go together. Because, and what I mean by the holistic approach is all those everyday little simple lifestyle factors, like what you eat, so your nutrition, your movement, your social interaction, your sleep, your environment that you're in, all of those everyday little factors are so often overlooked in their impact on education. And that's insane, like literally insane, because those everyday factors have a gigantic impact on a child or teenager's developing brain, whether that's from a learning, academic achievement, cognitive point of view, or whether it's from a physical health point of view or a mental health and well-being and happiness point of view. We cannot ignore those everyday factors. And so that, to me, it has to be like a mandatory part of education, is teaching not just the students, but also the parents and the teachers, understanding how those everyday factors make a huge difference. It's not enough to think we're allowing kids to reach their true potential just by going textbook learning. Like, it just cannot physically work like that.
Yeah. What would be a good example of what you would do to implement something that would be a holistic approach for
Yeah, I
using?
think, yeah. So I think, as we always say in our business, like, we run workshops at schools for the students and the parents and the teachers, so the whole school community gets on the same page, which is really important, because you can teach students information and the penny can drop for them and they can understand it. But especially if they're young, but even as teenagers, the parents are the ones who, have so much control over what they eat or what they're doing at home, or how the parents are talking to them and role modeling, etc. And the teachers obviously as well. So the magic that we've found really happens when those three key players in the education system are on board. And I always say, like, forget all the politics and policies and all that nonsense, and just make sure
Mhm.
those three key players are speaking the same language, on the same page, with the same sort of goals, because that's when the magic happens. And we get that feedback all the time from the parents and the principals and the teachers, about how it makes it so much more effective when all three groups are speaking the same language. And then in terms of like teachers in a classroom, sure, we don't have control over what the kids are sent to school to eat, for example, but we might over what they're getting served in the canteen. Or if we educate the parents more, the parents are more likely to send the kids to school with the healthier foods and understand it. But yeah, we can for example, in the classroom, we can make the classroom environment so much better. So not too hot because our brains can't learn, not too cold, obviously. We can bring in lots of nature and have loads and loads of plants, or at least posters of nature, because that makes literally our brain happier, healthier, and smarter all at the same time. We can make sure that the lighting's not super bright. We can make sure that there's music playing in the classroom, because that does amazing things for our brain. So there's so many things we can do that are so simple. And that's what I love, Leslie, is that in life, as the older I get, what I'm learning is the simple things are the most powerful, and they're so easy to change and implement, and then we can
It
feel so
is.
empowered, like we can do this. We have total control over so much of our life. And the way to have that control, exert that control, is just to make tiny, simple little changes, which we can all do, which have those huge effects, those huge benefits.
Yeah, I think it's just about setting your intentions and saying, I want to be intentional about using these brain-based strategies and understanding what is going to help and what is going to be beneficial for these students.
Yep, definitely, for sure.
Exactly. Well, what are some key techniques or strategies you would implement, and what are some challenges maybe that you have faced in trying to implement this? I know I get that, like, it is great and beneficial if you have everybody on board, but I would
Mhm.
also imagine that could be a big barrier and challenge to have the time to bring in those parents and say, hey, this is what we're doing and this is
Yeah.
how you can help your children, and then also, get principals on board or teachers on board when they're so busy and stressed in their own lives. They're like, oh my gosh, one more thing I have to do.
Yep, yep. Okay, that's brought up a lot of points. Okay, so
Yes.
number one is, yeah, you're definitely right. Sometimes, especially if it is a really big school, it's going to be, or a high school, it's going to be a lot harder to get the parents to come in and on board. Plus, what also happens is that we often get told by principals the parents who needed to come in most are the ones who didn't come in, because the ones that are super interested and want to do their best for their kids, they do make it in, which is wonderful. And what I would say to that is, fear not. By putting into place all the strategies that are brain based, we can, as teachers with the students in the classroom, still do amazing things. Case in point, that story I said, how I was teaching at the Big Perth High School. I didn't meet any of the parents because I was there for 4.5 weeks. It was a huge, gigantic public high school, but I still was able to turn those kids around and have them say things like, you've made this lesson non-boring. I never knew this subject could be engaging. You've made us actually learn and remember rather than just memorize stuff for the test and then forget it. Like, the feedback was absolutely phenomenal. Like, it shocked me. It was phenomenal. And their parents weren't on board. So you can still have amazing benefits just when it's you as the teacher. Yeah, working in the classroom with the students. What was the other part of your question?
um, I was saying, what are some specific key
Oh,
techniques and
yes.
strategies that you would implement?
Yes. Okay. So basically, I'll start with talking about a part of the brain that's towards the bottom and the back, and that's called the amygdala. And the amygdala is what turns on in kids' brains. So basically, electrical lightning storm up there, because obviously we have electricity in our brain. And when the amygdala is on or in superdrive, that's the sort of survival, fight or flight, I'm not having good emotions type part of the brain. So if the students in our class are worried or anxious, if they're scared, if they're tired, if they're grumpy, if they're stressed for whatever way, basically that amygdala will be on, which is not good because that stops this front part of our brain here behind our forehead, the prefrontal
Mhm.
cortex, from working properly. And that's the part of the brain that the kids need to be using to learn, to think, to be rational, to be logical, to do their schoolwork, to remember stuff. So that part of the brain cannot physically work properly if that amygdala is on. So the first thing we as teachers need to do is make sure that we implement strategies, very easy ones, that can shut that down. So that, like I said, music is great for that. So in your classroom and it can just be nice, non-lyrical, calming music, or before lessons, it can have lyrics because they don't need to focus just before the lesson starts. But anything positive or calming will shut down that amygdala very quickly. It's a very, very profound, powerful tool to do that. But you can also have non-lyrical music on while the kids are actually doing their work, because it can just be in the background, not distracting them. And in fact, makes them focus more because it's releasing
Yeah.
dopamine in their brain. So it's perfect. So that's a nice, easy one. You could obviously nature, like I said, if you have a more naturally nature-based classroom with lots of plants, or at least images of forests, waterfalls, plants, etc., that also shuts down that angry amygdala part of the brain. But then also teaching kids about it and saying, this is a part of the brain that turns on if we're feeling stressed, etc. Because if they're on board, they're empowered. And rather than just telling them, do this, for example, take deep breaths, they'll be like, why? Well, and then
Yeah.
if you've explained beforehand, they'll understand taking slow, long, deep breaths is incredibly powerful. That, again, that's what the military special ops soldiers and the athletes use to calm down their angry amygdala so they can switch back on to being their best self. So teaching the kids things like that, then when you say, let's do it, or as I say in class, once we teach kids, I'll go, okay, your amygdala's on. What do you want to do? And so they'll choose one of the strategies like finger breathing, deep breaths, and immediately it will start to shut their amygdala down and they can start to take control of it. So basically, okay, we'll fast forward, but once we've got the amygdala part of their brain calm, so they're in a good receptive state, then it's all about engaging them, because when they're not engaged, and their attention's not on the task, they literally cannot form a memory. So there's a chemical called dopamine, which is released in their brain when they have experienced good emotions. So if they're curious, like we talked about, curiosity is amazing. Getting them so you can get them curious easily, get them predicting. Show them a strange image on the board, or bring in a strange object, or get dressed up in a strange costume, anything that makes them go, what in the world is that? Ask them questions that make them predict, or show them anything that gets them curious. But it can also be excitement. Sometimes I also use disgust. So like kids, love some gory information or some strange, weird, gross pictures. So obviously within reason, but that sort of thing as well will, boom, attract their attention and get them curious. So yeah, we need to make sure that they're engaged and attentive right at the start of a lesson. And like I said, if they're not attentive, then there's this chemical that's called acetylcholine. And acetylcholine they get when they put their attention on a task. And if they don't get that chemical, they can't form a memory. End of story. They can't remember stuff. And so it's important for kids to know this, because then they'll understand why we say you can't be distracted. You've got to focus. Because then, like I said, rather than just telling them stuff, we're giving them the why and the how and the background behind it. Because I don't know about you, but as a kid, even as an adult, I don't like being told what to do. But if I know the why and the how, then I'm like, oh, it makes sense. I can rationalize this. I can understand why I'm doing this. And I think that works for a lot of kids, especially teenagers. If we just tell them to do something, but there's no rationality, no reason behind it, often they're like, well, why would I do it? But when they understand what's going on, then they can be like, got it. I'm going to choose actively to do that thing now. And
Yeah.
then,
I
I mean,
love
I'm
that.
skipping lots here. I'm
That's
skipping lots
fine.
here,
Go.
but basically, yeah, we need to get them attentive, and then we need to make sure that they're having chances to recall and revise and repeat the thing that they're learning in lots of different, what we call learning modes. So it surprises me sometimes, like we've been into certain schools, and when we explain that, we need to be teaching kids in lots of different ways. So, watch the documentary, but then get them to teach each other verbally, or read the chapter, but then get them to write or draw a brainstorm mind map to represent what they've learned, and like flick between the different stages. When I've done that, I do that in all the classrooms that I teach in, and the behavior issues just drop through the floor. The lesson goes by like that, and then the bell will go and the kids will be like, what? The lesson's over. Because they're moving between all these different activities, it doesn't get boring, especially sometimes when there's time limits as well. So that's perfect to combine with this. When they're forced to recall it and revise it, especially if you do space it out, so leave a little bit of time within a lesson, but obviously also over the days of the week and the weeks before you get them to repeat it and revise it, they have to put effort in, because the longer we leave it, it gets tricky. And when they're forced to put effort in, they get another chemical that really helps them learn called epinephrine. So again, kids often will think, well, if I have to put in effort, it means I'm stupid. You're not supposed to struggle if you're smart. But that's rubbish. And I always say, like, smart kids get smart because they put
So
in
rubbish.
effort, like you get
Yes.
smart if you put in effort and you don't give up. And then you teach them, in fact, if you don't put effort in, you won't get this chemical. And without that, it's very hard to remember stuff. I mean, these are chemicals that they're experimenting with military special ops soldiers, because they're finding that with these chemicals I've mentioned, they can remember stuff with just, a very short amount of time, a few repetitions. So these chemicals can't be ignored. They're so important, and it's so easy to get them. Put in effort, put your attention on it, and have good feelings of positivity, So yeah, definitely. And then another point that's really important is we need to make sure that we make the learning for the kids really meaningful and relevant to them, because again, if it's not meaningful and relevant, why would I pay attention to it? So that's
Exactly.
where one of the ways that I love to do this is just get to know the students in my classroom. So you can do this in lots of different ways. You can have them write letters to you. You can have one-on-one interviews. You can have just open class chats. But we really need to get to know our students, because then we know how to make the different topics or tasks we're teaching them meaningful and relevant, or ideally help to personalize different assessments and slants that we can take on different topics we're teaching them to match those interests that they have. So that's a really short nutshell.
Yes, it is. And it sounds very familiar to a lot of the things that I try to teach in my trauma informed classroom professional
Yep.
development course that I created. A lot of those things, are the same things I'm trying to teach as well. But even though that I'm focusing on students that have experienced trauma, it's actually beneficial for all students.
That's it.
So,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah.
That's
And
100% right. And it's the same over here. The practices that the government and different organizations that specialize in trauma over here say we need to be doing. In fact, the first two are literally provide those really safe, enriching, brain stimulating environments, and teach the students how their traumatic experience, i.e., turning on that amygdala way too much,
right.
affects their learning and things they can do to overcome it. And like you just said, those same strategies that help those kids feel happy and safe and remember work for every single child. So it's perfect.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay, you've covered so much with us. Um, how does
um,
so since we're talking about trauma, how does trauma and stress impact the brain? I mean, we talked about the amygdala. Is there any
yeah,
other avenue where the brain is affected due to stress?
yeah, okay, that's a good question. So yeah, like I said, the amygdala, or sort of this bottom limbic survival part of the brain down here, is the one that turns on, so electrical superstorms, whenever we do get stressed and have a lot of trauma. So if students are going home and that's what they're experiencing outside of school in their home life, that amygdala survival part of the brain will be on like a millionfold, far too much. And especially if it's on for an extended period of time as well. So basically, two things can happen. One is that when they rock up to school in our classrooms, that amygdala is still on. So they're still very much on edge, still very much in a stress survival state. And so that means that they're not going to be able to learn, and we can't expect them to physically learn academically with that front part of their brain. But then we also need to provide classroom environments where they can feel safe. So that's where the music comes in perfectly, the nature comes in perfectly, having them choose where they can sit, because sometimes sitting right at the front might not be good, because then they can't see anyone who's behind them. So they might want to choose where they're sitting, and really just having a good talk to them to help them. Like there might be certain things they want to do, like come into the classroom first, for example, so that they do start to feel safe, and therefore their amygdala can start to shut down. The other thing that can happen though is sometimes they can sort of go what's called like emotionally numb, and that they don't really respond to anything, and it's very hard to sort of excite them, or get them to sort of switch on, because they're just numbed so much, because that amygdala has been on overdrive for a long time. So you can have either one, and we have to, as teachers, make sure that we're obviously giving them some empathy and sympathy, and making that classroom environment and our teaching experience as calm and safe as possible, so that we become the trusted adult in their life, so that they can feel safe, they can relax with us, they can have some joy with us, because it might be the only time of their day that they do get to feel safe and have joy. In terms of other effects, absolutely. So have you heard of the stress hormone cortisol? So
Yeah.
when we're in a stress state, cortisol is flooding through their brain and their body. It impacts every cell in their body. And if we have a lot of cortisol at too high levels, or for too often, too long periods of time, that cortisol radically shuts down the immune system. I mean, so much so that if a person undergoes an organ transplant operation, they pump them, the one receiving the organ, they pump them full of corticosteroids, which is cortisol. Why? Because it shuts down the immune system, so enabling their body to accept and not reject that foreign organ that's being put into them. So when you hear that, it's very easy to understand how stress is such a leading cause of disease, and that if we have
Mm,
students who are constantly stressed, constantly being filled full of cortisol, because of that stress, that their immunity is going to go through the floor. So that happens when that amygdala is on and they're really stressed and anxious. The memory part of their brain, so the hippocampus, it physically shrinks. Also, when we're stressed and anxious, we can't make any new brain cells. Here's a couple of brain cells I prepared earlier. So we
Oh,
can't make any new brain cells, these little things. So these are the props that I use to teach kids, but we can't make any more brain cells when we're really stressed. And I think even above all of that, when their amygdala is on and they're really stressed, they don't feel happy. And of course, as adults, as teachers, like, we want kids to be happy. We want them to enjoy life and being at school. So for all of those reasons, we have to teach the kids, for example, what the amygdala is and why it's on, etc., and then give them strategies to be able to shut it down, like the deep breathing or the listening to music or the going out to nature or exercise. I mean, movement sort of, I
yes.
use this one personally when my amygdala's on and I've had a bad day. Movement, put on the
Interesting.
music, do some Zumba, go outside in nature for a run. Like, it benefits me. I feel it. I know all this science works in real life. So that's why I love teaching it to the kids.
Yes. Do you have any tools or resources that you recommend for people to reach out and look or investigate?
Well, I might take this opportunity to say that I'm super excited because in the last 2 weeks, I've actually launched the world's first Mind Brain Teacher PD app. So I'm
I
really, really
saw
excited.
that on your
I
Facebook
know,
page. That is
I know,
so exciting.
it really is. I'm really enjoying making it as well and building the whole app. So what I'm doing is I'm taking my full day workshops, which literally are full day teacher PD workshop, and splitting them up into 20 minutes videos PD a week, and a little practical takeaway that the teachers can actually try out in their classroom each week to match that topic. And I'm really enjoying it because I'll be able to reach people who can't come to one of our workshops, or who don't go to a school, who book us to present for them. And of course, that's millions, so that'll be really awesome. And also, I won't have to sort of rush, which is when we do the full Teach PD workshop, the feedback is absolutely phenomenal. Like, it's incredible, like best PD ever. We get that all the time, which is I'm so grateful for it. But we have to fit a lot in because it's a whole holistic approach. It's very comprehensive. Whereas with the app, like I said, I don't have to rush it. So it's individual bits. And then by the end of it, the teachers will have, over time, rather than all at once, understood all about the brain and put into practice all these little things. So it will feel effortless and so easy and simple, but it will be so powerful because they will have made little tweaks to their classroom environment, the different words and feedback that they use, etc. So yeah, definitely recommend that resource. And I think with the like, what you can do for the kids is explain it to them with the props. So in the app, I actually show all the different props, and I suggest, like, you might want to, make some lightning, etc., or make the neurons. And there's different videos on there that they can use with the students as well. But I think some physical props is great because our eyes, our brain, is devoted to visual processing. So much of our brain is devoted to visual processing. So get yourself some props off, whether it's a shop or, a $2 shop, or off eBay. But anything you can do to make it a bit more visually engaging is great. And one thing I do want to say, though, is that it might sound like, oh, this is a completely new thing. Like, I haven't got, like you said before, actually, Leslie,
Yes.
like principals will think, I haven't got time for this new approach. And
Yes.
we always kind of go, oh, when we get told that, because I can fully understand, like, that's what it seems like. But in actual fact, it makes teaching less stressful. It takes up less time because it's not an extra add-on. It's not a program. It's not an extra lesson to teach. It's an approach. It's information. It's empowering knowledge, and little strategies and techniques that will save you time and save you stress and help the kids achieve better, etc. So, and it's
I feel
also
like
not
it's like a system or something, right? Like implementing
mm,
this system, like this is how we're going to approach these different aspects when they come up.
yeah.
That's
And
kind
it's
of how
kind
I
of,
feel about my trauma informed stuff too.
yeah, it's kind of like just adding to your pedagogy, your teaching
Hmm.
style. And it will, at first, some of the different types of feedback or different things you might do to start lessons or finish lessons might seem a bit weird, but as soon as you have done them for a few weeks, then, like it is for me now, it's like, well, that's just how I teach. That's just me. That's just who I am. It's just such a
Yeah.
natural thing. Um, So yeah, it's definitely not about sort of reinventing the wheel. It's not about saying teachers, right, everything you've ever done, throw it out the window. Obviously not, because there are so many amazing teachers out there that have had so many incredible successes with students. Absolutely amazing. It's about knowing the why and the how behind which ones of
Yes.
those strategies work and why, so that instead of it just being sort of potluck, which lesson or activity or task or assessment or conversation will be successful, you know exactly what components or elements you can use in a lesson or assessment to make it effective and successful. So it just makes the whole process a lot easier and a lot less stressful. And as we know, teaching can be very time consuming and stressful.
Yes, exactly. Um, well, what is a success story that you have that through your experience? I mean, I know you talked about, the 4 week
Yep.
that you taught and how those students responded. Is there
Yep.
like a success story you know of a particular student who was like really struggling, and how did that
Yeah, for sure, for
happening come
sure.
about? Yeah.
So, okay. So in my first year of teaching, I had a mixed grade class. So I had, I'm not sure what it would equal to you in America, but basically 7 to 12-year-olds in the class together. And so this lovely little girl, she came into the class 7 years old to start year three. She was the first student, one of the first students I ever taught as a qualified teacher. And she knew for a fact that she was stupid. She knew it. She had obviously learnt this from past experiences in her old school, etc. But she knew she couldn't do anything without help. She was dumb and that she wouldn't, there was no point trying, because she knew that nothing she'd do was good enough. So I worked with her as I was learning about the brain. We both sort of learnt together. I taught her everything. And really helped her understand what is meant by a growth mindset, brain science, like physically in the brain, what she can do when,
Hmm.
like, to help herself become smarter, to shut down that amygdala when she gets worried and stressed about making mistakes or not being good enough, and her potential for change and her incredible potential for overcoming that belief that she had about herself and actually in reality achieving very well. So she went through year three, year four, year five, and year six, learning all along the way with me about her amygdala and what she could do and the brain chemicals and the potential of the human mind and the brain as being phenomenal. And she finished year six, and then she went into the high school section of the school. And then a couple of weeks into her year, so her high school, like leaving the primary school with me and going into high school, her mum came and knocked on my classroom door and said, I just need to tell you about so-and-so. She actually, across all 5 campuses in the whole state, got the top award for her history assignment. And she was so excited with
Wow.
herself. And then if we fast forward on to the end of year 12, I was not working at that school by that stage, but she actually had the receptionist call me and say, she's, finishing year 12, she'd like to see you, can you pop into the school? So I said, sure. So we went in there, and during her recess break, she came into the room and she said, I really have been reflecting a lot on my schooling. And I really wanted to thank you, because if you had not been my teacher in primary school and taught me that I could grow my brain and that I could be smart and that I had that potential and I could do it, I would not be where I am today. She said, I'm finishing year 12 and I've been doing ATAR, which is like the hot top sort of high level subjects. And she goes, and I've got a number of B grades. She's like, I would never have done this without you. You really taught me that I could believe in myself and I could do anything if I put the effort in. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's amazing. So for
Oh, that
her
makes
to,
me want to cry.
to
Like, cheering up.
yeah, that's it. And for her to carry that with her, when I taught her when she was 7 and 8 and 9 and 10, and then at the end of high school when she was leaving school, to like, so that was that will always stay with me. And we got a nice selfie together. So that was really cool. But
Yeah.
yeah, there's lots of little stories like that, even within workshops, like just a single workshop, which I think points to the fact that if you teach it to a class over the whole year, the benefits can be a millionfold. But just in a single workshop, we have similar sort of feedback from students where they're like, you've changed my life, like within a 2-hour workshop.
Hmm.
So it's really powerful that they feel heard. They feel like it doesn't matter what sort of learning difficulty or disability. And we say to them, like, you might think, well, my potential can't be that incredible, Tammy, because, I've got ADHD, or I've got dyslexia, or I'm really bad at reading, or I'm really bad at maths. And I always say to them, don't care, because your brain is amazing. And if you put in the effort and use all these strategies we're going to teach you today and ask for help when you need it, like, you can do anything, achieve anything you set your mind to.
Right. I love that. I love that so much. Well, I appreciate you coming on today and talking with us. And we have learned so many little nuggets here. Is there any last tip or advice that you would have for a teacher? Maybe one particular strategy? I know you had mentioned something about how you would start a lesson and end a lesson. Is there a particular strategy that you would just in general, this is, if we're going to do anything that is connected to this, what is one thing a teacher could do?
Okay.
That's hard.
Hmm.
I know there's a lot.
Yeah, it is hard to just be one. Okay, actually, no, it's not hard. It's actually, no, good question, Leslie. This is easy. Okay, it is make sure that we as the teacher are excited and interested in our lessons, because if we are not, we cannot expect our kids to be. If we don't want to go to class, if we're dreading walking in there, if we're bored with the topic or the task we're giving them or the way that we're explaining it, we can't expect them to be anything less. So
Yes.
I won't go into the brain science of it now, but basically our emotions and our attitudes are literally mirrored in the brains of our students. So we need to make sure that we are in love with our lessons. We are really genuinely interested and enthusiastic and excited about what we are learning, and that we basically love being a teacher. Because if we get to the point where we really don't, we can't expect the students to really like being a student in our classroom. So it would definitely, that would be my number one takeaway. Make sure that it starts with us as teachers. Make sure our emotions and attitudes are on point, and that we're exhibiting the emotions and attitudes we want our kids to have. We want them to be optimistic, so let's be optimistic. We want them to not worry about making mistakes, so let's be open and vulnerable when we muck up. So yeah, definitely
I
start with
know,
us.
100% it starts with you. Like you as the
Mm-hmm.
teacher, you have to be, you know how when we started this, we talked about how you wanted to help students reach their potential, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it also has to start with the teacher themselves wanting to care enough about themselves, provide their own
Yep.
self-care, and be mentally ready to handle teaching a class full of children so that they
Yep.
can get there too. Because those are all the things I'm trying to teach as well. You know, I want to teach
Yep.
the trauma-informed classroom to get those teachers connected to their students. But in
Yep.
addition to that, if it doesn't, they're not in the right place or mindset, that's not
That's
going to
it for
happen
sure.
either.
For sure. It's such a good point, because like we can't take people, i.e. our students, past where we're at. So if we need to improve our self-talk, our thoughts, our amount of movement that we do, our mental health, like you said, our well-being, like we can do that alongside the students. And that is really powerful to learn with them and to see and to be open with them about that sort of learning together. Definitely. Yeah, it really can be a sort of collaborative sort of experience. And I think, like, I know that sometimes, like, there are classes out there, especially those high school ones, that are very, 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 very hard and tricky. And the way that and I obviously in my first couple of years, I wasn't able to do this because I didn't know all this. But the way I do it now is I can confidently and comfortably be in that classroom and stay calm with only positivity. And I say this to the students, even if they're mucking around and being really naughty, like, it's your behavior that's not very helpful at the moment or not very respectful at the moment. But I know deep down you are a good person. And every
Mhm.
single one of us, I believe that deep down inside us, we are an amazing, good person. We just have so many layers put on top by, for example, trauma, our experiences, things we've been told, things we've come to believe about ourselves, struggles we've had, etc. And being able to, yes, see the students for that goodness that they all have in them and talk to and teach that part of them helps me stay calm, because I know that that behavior is not, it's not a reflection of me, or
Yeah.
who I am as a person. I'm here as a good person with good intentions, and so are they deep down. And being open with them about that and saying, like, your behavior, that's, terrible, not respectful, whatever. But deep down, I know that you're a good person, and I'm here to help you overcome whatever you need to overcome.
Yes. That is awesome. I love you leaving with that impact in that message. So, if people want to find out more about what you do, where can they find you?
Okay, so our website is abovebeyondeducation.com. So it's all one word, abovebeyondeducation.com. Or you can look at it, or you can find our Facebook page from our website, but our Facebook page is Above Beyond Education also. And then if you'd like to have a look at the app, which I highly recommend because it's super exciting, it's on Google and Apple phones, and it's just The Brainy Blossoms. And I called it The Brainy Blossoms because it allows us as teachers to help the students we teach blossom into their best selves using a holistic brain-based approach to education.
Yeah, it reminds me of I'm designing some t-shirts to go with my Master Your Moment self-care program that I have, and one of them is Nurture Your Mind, and I have like an image of a person's face with their brain is open up and it has flowers coming out of it. So
Oh, perfect. There we go. Perfect, perfect.
yeah, it sounds really close to that. Well, thank you, Tammy Ann, to come on here today. I really appreciate it. I have really, really enjoyed our talk. And I will put all of the links into the description. And I think if I can figure out how to do it, I'll actually add the TEDx talk to the end of the YouTube podcast episode as
Go
well,
for it. Yeah, go for
because
it.
I found it absolutely amazing and very beneficial. So I think
Oh,
everybody should watch that as well.
thank you very much, Leslie. I've loved speaking with you, and I really appreciate you having me on.